So we are ready. Evgeniya, are you ready? Please
Yes,
share the screen and we will listen you very careful and it will be a lot of questions. Good luck.
Thank you. I start. Wait a minute, please. Wait a second. I'm sorry. Yeah. Do you see my presentation? Yeah. Dear colleagues, dear students, I'm happy to see all of you. Thank you so much for your interest in my lecture. As Yuri said, this talk was conceived as a lecture for students. Therefore, its topic is so broad. But later it became clear that I would present my topic in front of the mixed audience of the students and professionals, members of ISHM. After consulting with Yuris, I decided to combine two different parts that could be interesting for both for beginners and experienced researchers. The specific part of my lecture that can be especially interesting for the members of ISHM is two different approaches to the understanding of health and disease in the Soviet theoretical medicine in 1960s, 1980s. But before that, I would like to briefly describe the two main models of health and disease in the Western medical tradition that appeared in classical antiquity and modern era and influenced the views on health and disease in the Soviet theoretical medicine, and in which we can find the same basic elements of both models along with the very new moments. My talk is not only about facts, but mostly about understanding and interpretations of health and disease and how it had been changing. The ancient Greeks explained health and disease cosmologically and anthropologically, that is, in close relation to nature and in general, and human nature in particular. The pre-Socratic philosophers, who, though the physicians of this time, developed a universal model of health, those outlines can be found in the medical texts of Hippocrates and other physicians of the Corpus Hippocraticum. Empedocles was one of these philosophers and physicians whose theories made great impacts on the Greek medicine. The treatise Nature of Man drew heavily on his ideas for what was later to be seen as theory of the few humors. Empedocles believes in four cosmic elements: earth, air, fire, and water, linked with four qualities: hot, cold, wet, or moist, and dry, had great explanatory potential. Because of its own long and influential history, this fear of the four humors, blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, has dominated the Greek medicine and many centuries afterwards. In this model of health and disease, the idea of similarity between microcosm, human body, and macrocosm, universe, is clearly seen. The Greek word cosmos can, depending on its context, mean beauty, order, the world, or any combination of the three. Health was understood in this perspective to be a condition of harmony or balance, isonomia, or a good mixture among the basic components that make up both nature in general and individual body. Disease, on the other hand, was regarded as discordance or an inappropriate dominance, monarchia, disproportion, dyscrasia, or bodily fluids, humors, and elements. Ancient Greek had two words generally translated as health: hygeia, meaning and well way of living, and I'm sorry for my pronunciation, euxia, meaning good habit of body. Leon Kans notes that both Greek words for health are totally unrelated to all the words for disease, illness, and sickness. In addition, the Greek terms for health, unlike the English, are unrelated to all the terms for healing. This Health for the ancient Greek was a state or condition unrelated to and prior to both disease and healers. The Greek term stressed the functioning of the whole, and not only it working, but it working well. So Greek understanding of health is the well-working of the core organism as a whole, an activity of the living body in accordance with its specific excellences. Therefore, in Greek medicine, healing is an action which goal is the restoration of health, but not a struggle with disease. The task of a Greek doctor was to restore a patient's health level at which a body would be able to cope with the disease on its own. Dietetics was considered of primary importance to the therapeutic process, followed by medication, and lastly by surgery. A hierarchy exactly opposite to the prevailing Western approach of today. In the ancient perspective, dietetics involves much more than a health-conscious regulation of food and drink. Rather, it entailed a broad concept of how one should live a healthy life. For the same reason, ancient doctors didn't single out or describe specific diseases, but only the most common stable combinations of symptoms and signs, such as fever, consumption, plaque, dropsy, phthisis, etc. The term phthisis, for instance, usually interpreted as tuberculosis, could cover a variety of other wasting disease. Sores, gangrenes, and abscesses, some quite dramatically described, were all lumped together, and there was no guarantee that one author's terminology for pastilles coincided with that of another. The philosophy of the French mathematician René Descartes had a significant impact on changing the Greek understanding of health and disease that remained in the Western medicine until the modern era. According to Descartes, the nature as a whole and the human body are perfect clockwork mechanisms set in motion by God to function mechanically. As a consequence, the new mechanical model of health and disease has begun to take shape. The significant feature of this model, in contrast to the Greek one, was the shifting of the focus of medicine on disease, which had been increasing from century to century. We can see it already in the approach of British physician Thomas Sydenham. Sydenham focuses on the detailed description of manifestation of disease, construing them as enduring types and patterns of symptoms. Sydenham's understanding of disease acquires negative connotation in comparison with the Greek one. Disease cannot occur without some co-interaction to the vital forces. So every disease is a battle of nature with a painful cause. Disease, however repugnant its causes may be to the nature of the human body, is nothing more than the reciprocal efforts of nature, which seeks to restore the health of the patient by eliminating a disease-causing matter. The emergence of pathological anatomy was naturally based on the new idea that disease has an exact localization inside the human body. Since the 18th century, the investigation of site of disease, locus morbi, progressed deeper and deeper into the body, from the organ, morganii, to the tissue, bisha, and to the cell, vircho. Carrying out many autopsies and trying to find the manifestation of disease inside a dead body, a doctor-scientist spent no less time in an anatomical theater than in a hospital. Having seen firsthand the pathomorphological substrate of the disease in a corpse, doctors sought to detect it into the body of a living patient. That significantly encouraged the development of the practice of medicine and, first of all, diagnostics. The increasingly self-conscious scientific medicine concentrated on curing disease and neglected the maintenance of good health. In the 19th century, dietetics lost its broader or anthropological meaning and came to refer to the intake of food and drink. Thus, a 2,000-year-old tradition already limited in the 18th century reached its end. The concept of health was replaced by the concept of norm. In comparison with Greek views on health as excellences, well-working of human organism, the understanding of norm during New Era began to convey invariableness, the average parameters of the human body's mechanism functioning. In the definitions of the second half of the 19th century, we can see that concept of norm and disease were associated with long-known idea of balance, which was understood in a new way as adaptation, self-preservation, regulation, or viability. For instance, a Russian outstanding physician Sergei Botkin defined disease as any disturbance of the balance that is not restored by the adaptive capacity of the body, and the manifestation of life in unfavorable and harmful conditions for it. The German pathologist Rudolf Virchow's definition of disease was widely accepted. Disease begins at that moment then the regulatory system of the body is not sufficient to overcome a disturbance. It's not life under abnormal circumstances, nor the disturbance as such which produces a disease. Rather, the disease begins with the insufficiency of regulatory mechanisms. Both these definitions influenced the views on health and disease in the Soviet theory of medicine. By the 1960s, the USSR had two competing approaches in general human pathology. Each of these included the prominent researchers and doctors. On the one hand, Ippolit Vassilievich Davidovsky, the outstanding Soviet pathologist. On the other, Sarkisov, Paltsev, Khitrov, Addo, and many others. The key point of Davidovsky's conception is that a designation of certain manifestation of human body as abnormal, pathological, is very problematic. Concept of disease includes an irreducible evaluative element. He emphasizes the artificiality of the term disease, pathology, pathological. Sick cell, sick organ, and sick organism are very conceptual concepts. In them, the subjective assessment of the phenomenon often overlaps the true idea of its physiological essence, he wrote. The concept of disease for Davidovsky doesn't have common negative meaning. He states that the states that are recognized by this term is an integral part of life, forms of adaptation to the living conditions. In the term disease, according to Davidovsky, conveys compensatory and adaptive processes that have developed and become fixed in the genotype in the course of evolution, without which human survival would not be possible. Adaptation to the external environment is often occurred at the cost of significant morphological and functional shifts that go to the field of nosology. It's wrong to look at the process of adaptation of the body as a process that are always painless and absolutely expedient. Evaluation of pathological states as something abnormal as opposed to normal, physiological, according to Davidovsky, is impossible, because being sick is the same property of the living as reproduction, metabolism, death. However, if, according to Davidovsky, pathological phenomena do not have any specific qualities in comparison with normal ones, then the following questions naturally arise. What processes occurring in the human body can be called pathological ones, and which are normal ones? If a patient suffers subjectively from certain conditions of the body, then how they can be correctly identified and treated? Davidovsky answered these questions as follows. Unfavorable pathological conditions of the body do not have a biologically universal designation. They might be defined as pathological only in each unique medical case. The individual as a living material system with the most complex correlative connections is the substrate that, in the first of the etiological factors acting on it, is the primate of action or non-action, disease or non-disease, and if the disease, then in its own way, originally expressed. According to Davidovsky, doctors should approach each medical case individually, both when determining the degree and nature of its pathology, and then choosing methods and treatment. Therefore, medical intervention into a patient's body should be carried out taking into account two important moments. First, the presence of an objectively recorded suffering of the patient's body, which is a manifestation of individual mechanism of hereditary reactions to the adaptation of this organism to the environment. Second, the degree of this intervention should be directly proportional to the degree of threat of the pathological condition to a patient's life. A different position from Davidovsky was occupied by another direction of general human pathology, represented by Sarkisov, Paltsev, Khitrov, Ado, etc. Along with Davidovsky, considering disease in terms of adaptation, they argued about the fundamental incomparability of health and disease. Disease is a fundamentally new state of the body, qualitatively different from health. Pathological phenomena, in their opinion, are not one of manifestation of adaptation, but its violation. First of all, the state of disease is characterized by a violation or damage of the structure and function of an organ, tissue, individual cells. The occurrence of locus morbi is the main difference between a sick person and a healthy one. The disease is characterized by a rearrangement of the body's forces, the continuous formation of new combination and recombination that are not normal from the function inherited in the body. All these authors consider disease as a contradictory unity of damage, breakage, and protection, compensation. Another characteristic feature of the disease is that due to the occurrence of the pathological process, there is a sharp intensification of the body's protective reactions, inflammation, fever, immunity, regeneration, hypertrophy, and hyperplasia, etc. In this model, the idea of adaptation takes on completely new interpretations in terms of health and disease. According to Alexei Dmitrievich Ado, a man existing simultaneously in two different realities, social and nature, forms for himself the opposite ways of interacting with them. He remakes nature of his body in accordance with his social needs in order to adapt to the social environment. The process of adaptation of a person as a social being to the social environment surrounding him are extremely important, he wrote. Health becomes an indicator of adaptation to the social environment. For a person as a social being, the norm or health is a form of existence that allows the most complete participation in various types of social and labor activities. This approach is based on the dialectical materialism, ideological system which was widespread in the Soviet science and medicine. It's easy to see that this understanding of health and disease justifies the use of medical intervention to eliminate biologically normal conditions of the body. For a reason, the USSR was the first in the world country to legalize abortion in 1920. It's interesting that the similar discussions appeared in the late 1970s in the Western philosophy of medicine. There were, and there are, two different approaches to the understanding of health and disease: nominalism and realism. Nominalists argued that the disease doesn't exist as an objective biological phenomenon. The identification of conditions as pathological is not based on objective biological criteria, but on a particular system of social preferences. According to realistic or functional approach, health and disease are qualitatively different states of human organism, separating from each other by a specific violation of the functions of the human body, which has a certain localization, locus morbi. Surprisingly, that both directions of Soviet general pathology didn't refer themselves to any of these approaches. They didn't see themselves as nominalists or realists. This discussion took place in a close professional environment and didn't overlap in any way with Western discussions about nominalism and realism. Summarizing, I would like to notice that each of the views on health and disease that I have described today is based on a certain worldview that includes the idea of a man, a world, and the relationships within them. In ancient Greece, cosmos is a perfection, beauty, order, which corresponds with health, considered as harmony or balance. And Greek medicine was focused on health, the well-working of the organism as a whole, when a body is able to cope with the disease on its own. Mechanical view on health and disease also reflects the idea of similarity between a man and nature. However, nature and self, including human nature, was considered in a different way as a machine, a mechanism which works according to average parameters. The normal operation of this machine may be hindered by disease, understood as damage, breakage. The patient became more and more an object. The patient's subjectivity or personality was disregarded, and the history of the patient was reduced to the history of disease. Davidovsky follows the tradition of both previous models. He considered a man as a part of nature, specifying him as a biological species subject to the laws of evolution. According to Davidovsky, we can call certain conditions as pathological only in each unique medical case. I assume that using this approach to the understanding of health and disease, he tried to overcome the shortcomings of the mechanical model, while maintaining its advantages, which consisted in focusing on scientific methods and knowledge. Davidovsky's conception has great potential for modern medicine, limiting it from the use of invasive technologies to combat biologically normal conditions of the human body. The model of health and disease proposed by Sarkisov and his colleagues reflects the same idea that man is a part of the world and depends on it, but this world is considered as social environment. In this approach, the view on disease is very much alike with the mechanical one. Considering disease as damage has led to the increasing its negative meaning. In addition, the understanding of health based on social norms turns out human organism into a raw material for successful social existence, and medicine into a tool of transformation of biological human nature under certain social standards. The problem side of this model isn't that their understanding of health and disease includes social factors, but that human biological nature is considered as secondary, subordinate to social standards. There you can see the literature I used. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Evgenia. Yes, you are hero. The topic will be probably never stop to discuss, and the task was very difficult. And why it's so complicated? Why the scientists of the let's say 20th century would like to complicate? So I like the statement of Sergei Botkin. It's understandable for me. If we are talking about further, it's like a mixture, but at the same time, I can see the influence from the Greece and other things. I think it will be discussion on that. And thank you for your summarized chart at the end, because at least that help to understand. But probably, yeah, is it something new now in Russia? You have some different concept, or it's still empowered Davidov and Sarkisov concepts, or how it is?
Unfortunately, now in Russia, we didn't have such discussions for about 30 years. And we don't have any new versions of health and disease because there are not scientists, doctors, or philosophers who continue to think about it, who continue to offer new versions, new views on health and disease.
How you consider it? What happened with the Sergei Botkin concept? Was it developed? Who was his follower, or it was forgotten, or as in unuseful? Or
I think that maybe I don't know. Frankly speaking, Julius, I don't like the Botkin's version very much because he told about damage, that disease is a damage, and I like Davidovsky's version. I am a nominalist, I think so. That I think that we just call some conditions as normal, abnormal, healthy, or it's our designation. And that's why, you see, then we call some conditions as damage when we give them bad, I don't know, not so very well good connotations. We always try to eliminate it from our body. But it's the next step is to say that, okay, I don't know, the size of my nose, it's maybe it's there are some problem with my nose, and the next step is to call it as disease, and to call it disease and to make it biologically abnormal condition, and to do something with your normal nose on. You see that I don't know. Now in modern medicine and Russian medicine, disease considered as damage. Yes, and it's Botkin's approach.
Thank you for your honesty, Evgenia. Now I allow to ask another questions and comments, or start the discussion. So please unmute your microphones when you are asking a question. Any comments? We are confused. It was quite.
Maybe I know I was not so good in my speaking. Maybe we don't understand anything.
No, everybody understands. The topic is difficult.
And then may I say, thank you, Professor Panova. It was very clear. It is surprising, at least to me, because you opened a window I was not used to discuss about, because could be for such a long time. It was like at least in our hemisphere, East was far away from West. And it explains why I was a little bit surprised. It must be because of my poor knowledge about the Eastern physiologies, the neurophysiology, scientific world, in medicine, I mean. I remember what is linked to my medical student experience, how important was Pavlov history to the scholars' experience many decades ago. And I know also that the Russian experience by Pavlov was also linked to the Cambridge experience, a true link between East and West medicine. I remember one of the best pupils of Professor Pavlov his name was Leon, the surname, I forgot the surname. Well, he went to Cambridge to share with Professor Langley there the status of medicine, both in Western and Eastern side of European continent. So you widened at least my horizons, just speaking about your research and your cultural credit. Thank you. I have no question. Just I am now wondering about the new links that are going on between the search for a new anti-COVID vaccine and the struggle to fix the Sputnik vaccine in the Western European countries when he is already so popular in many other countries, such like Israel or many others around the world. Thank you for your lecture.
Thank you, Alfred. My topic was limited by Western tradition because frankly speaking, I'm not so an expert in Eastern tradition. I mean, I know that the same moments as similarity between microcosm and microcosm and macrocosm was in Indian medicine, Chinese medicine, and so on. And but I didn't focus on them, and there were no conflict or on interaction between Western and Eastern traditions in my lecture.
Thank you for both, and thank you, Alfredo, that you raised such an important question. I'm also thinking about Sputnik. You see, in European Union, we have kind of not enough vaccine. And why not Sputnik? If European Union will approve, definitely I will be volunteer, because I grew up in Soviet Union. I have, let's say, during my life, tons of vaccine. And actually it was produced. I think the traditions of the Russian vaccines are very good. The issue was that it was not enough material for approval, clinical or clinical data. Now it's enough. But what I would like to say is that Jimbo asked question in chat. Evgenia, if you can open the chat, you will see that Jimbo asking you, can we conclude that the philosophical explanation of disease is gradually being politicized? We return to our first two lectures in autumn.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about the first lecture while I was preparing my this talk. Yes, I think the first question, the answer on this question, I think maybe yes, because this approach, dialectical materialism, was highly It was an approach in the politics as well, in Soviet science, medicine, and politics as well. And that's why I think in some way it could be called the politicized approach. It could, because it was the same idea, the same approach that a person always should be subordinate their state. You see, the society. Yes, the person is a tool of society. Yes, that person may be individual. It will be better. Individual, not a person. And this approach was in politics and science, medicine. And the second question: does the evolution from subjective to objective reflect the need for the operation of the state apparatus? And I don't understand now. I try to.
It's like what I mean is like, does the evolution from you mentioned that like ancient time that was subjective point of view for the disease we study. Now we are doing them objectively because we somehow politicalized the disease, because we have the government has the like public health department, which is like administration of the health department. So they're like, did she teach us in public health in the class? They said if the patient is ill, so we are lacking one people who can work, so they will have some economic impact to our society. So I'm thinking about if this subjective like evolution to objective is kind of the like increasing of the state machine, I would say. So that is like a result for this, because the power of the government is increasing, which is influence the medical area. It's like this. And by the way, thank you so much for your wonderful lecture.
Thank you. Thank you. If I understood you correctly, I will answer. I would answer yes. Maybe it's, but it's interesting that in Soviet approach with Sarkisov and Ado and so on, their main criteria for health work was workability. Yes, ability to work. And in this version, it was very close to ability to live. Yes, it maybe biologically wide phenomena or conditions may be called as healthy phenomena, but we can see that if we two things: if we call disease as damage, a second thing, if we turn out health in a social norm, it allows society or state to use the biological nature of individual, because you can call some social I don't know, very long nose, or I'm very tall, so why I'm so tall? Yeah, yes, it's biologically normal conditions, but for this society it might be not so normal. Maybe I need to reduce my length of my body, so on, you see. And that's why, and when we should understand the main thing that this topic is a topic of my PhD, and I was thinking very long about this, very much time, and it's philosophical. It was philosophical PhD, not historical, and that's why I understand some problems with maybe with the discussion on this topic, because you got used to the facts, you see, to the facts, not some interpretations, but it's historically and historically based You see, and they have some facts, these understandings. So yes, I think this trend that I see this trend that individual and his body becomes like a material for a state or society.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, Evgenia, you see, yeah, if it's your PhD topic, but what is my knowledge from, let's say, Soviet times, that any theory, any concept, definitely it was framed in the frame of ideology. So when we are reading, we need to know how to read. The text is one, but you need to read in between lines and remember about this frame. So we also have a question from Bolislav Lichterman. Nice to see you, Bolislav. And your question to Evgenia is, what about nervism in the chat?
Nervism?
Yeah, nervism.
I see, but I don't see it in the chat.
It's in the chat. Let you see. Well,
what about nervism? Yes.
Yeah.
Bolislav Leonidovich, what about nervism? What do you mean?
Yeah, in a way, Alfredo raised this topic. You didn't mention Pavlov's teaching, which heavily influenced Soviet medicine. Yeah,
but I didn't mention it because it wasn't my goal to mention Pavlov's topic. That it wasn't my goal. It wasn't a topic of the lecture.
Yeah, well,
see,
it was.
No. No, and no, it's not a defense of PhD dissertation, you see, and it wasn't my topic, it wasn't my goal, and we can discuss the nervism now if you want.
Yeah, because it was the key element of Pavlovian view on health and disease. Yeah, that's evident. So you just quote pathologists, but physiologists also had a say in this. Well, how would I say, dialogue?
Yes, there were. Yes, I can see there were Bykov. Because we can discuss it, but I'm afraid that it's not so many people that are aware about Pavlov's interpretations. As Bykov as his pupil, and he his conception. That Bolislav Leonidovich, that Pavlov's conception was very wrong, very badly applied to the medicine. And now Baradulin criticized this, if you remember. You see? Bolislav Leonidovich, do you remember?
I think it played a crucial role in defining, Soviet view on health and disease. This is Pavlovian teaching on conditioned reflex, and Alfredo mentioned Leon Arbeli. Yes,
Arbeli.
That's what you probably mentioned. So it's well, I think it's and this idea of supremacy of nervous system in health and disease is directly related to the topic that was raised. Yeah, and another thing that I would disagree. You said that nobody is working in this field nowadays. That's simply not true. For example, Professor Tishenko, a philosopher, he wrote quite a lot on this topic, on health and disease, and he is alive and working in this field nowadays. I didn't see any reference to Yuri Shilinis. It was outstanding medical historian. Yuris probably knew him. And he wrote extensively exactly on this same topic about pathology. I think that should be added.
Okay, Bolislav, I'm working with Pavel Dmitrievich Tishenko now. I'm working on the Encyclopedia of Bioethics, and I know for sure what he has written about health and disease, believe me, because I've written everything that was, I've read everything that was written in Russian, almost everything on this topic. And no, you are mistaken. Tishenko, he didn't wrote anything about the health and disease. It's not the point, I think, of our discussion now.
Dear colleagues, we still have time for maybe one, maximum two questions. And thank you, Boleslav, that you asked these questions. And what I see is that we really need to talk about Pavlov, about Arbeli, yeah? And it will be nice to find the volunteers, because it's a brand, yeah, and especially for our colleagues from Western Europe and other part of the world. So any other question? Because we have today more than 25 participants.
Yuris,
Yes.
May I add in those days, the challenge between the conditioned reflexes theory and the associated reflex theory by Vladimir Becherev. I think these are also 2 points linked to the social and political atmosphere of those days. As probably you know, Vladimir Becherev was important even to not only to discuss for the struggle between himself and Pavlov, but also because he helped the Western countries to understand the process of hypnotherapy. In Western Europe, he was one of the chief researchers signaling his research in that field. That was so important also for the flight of psychoanalysis and psychotherapy. So I think it's really a topic worth to be opened, given to somebody who is really able to explain to those of us who don't know many things about that regional area of Europe that started at the beginning of the 20th century, a new field of research linked to the social problems. It's just a proposal.
Very good. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Definitely need to be also in our scope. And I got one, let's say, last question from Lizette Lovett. Yeah, we see your first time. And your question is, how did these different approaches affect the understanding of mental illness in the 70s? Why you are talking about 70s? It's something particular in 70s regarding the mental disease?
Only because Panova mentioned the 1970s.
Okay.
I recall that there was quite a difference of opinion about how psychiatrists worked in Soviet Union against other Western psychiatrists, particularly in Britain at the time.
I think that maybe Boleslav Leonidovich will answer these questions. This question more than me, because he is an expert in history of psychiatry and neurology. I studied a lot human general pathology, not just how to say it, private pathology. You see, and there were some Soviet researchers and physicians who had their interpretations, and it's a good idea to compare the general pathology, the approaches to health and disease in general pathology and in private pathology. But I have never done it. It's a good idea. Thank you very much.
Definitely, it needs to be the reflection, let's say, on the mental health as well. But it's a great idea. Maybe Boleslav, if you would like to present some topic for us, let's say you see the trends now, the floor is really open. What I would like to say, my task is to keep the time. We have 5 minutes, so dear participants, first of all, I would like to remind again and again, and with a big pleasure, that the 47th Centennial Congress of International Society for the History of Medicine will take place in Riga, starting from August 23 this year. Until Monday, you can submit additional abstracts, not only on the topic of the history of epidemics and pandemics, but if you, let's say, not reach the limit of your abstract, I think it's 2 or 3, and have during this year discovered some additional topics, please submit. Until Monday, submission is open. So you need to decide, will you participate in Riga Congress, let's say, in live on the Congress spot in August, or to be a virtual participant, because all the Congress will be streamed on internet, on the Zoom platform, on our YouTube platform. So you need to decide about that until the June 1st. The great news is that Eva, Laura, we are working on the summer course for the students, because we also will keep these promises. I will not tell you all great surprises what we will prepare for you, but we will announce in the ISHM in the newsletter on the early April, end of March. Please follow the International Society History of Medicine newsletter. Of course, it will be at the same time on the Congress webpage. And actually, I would like to say thank you for to our students who have participated in all our lectures from in autumn session and winter session, and I'm sure also in spring session. I'm talking about Yekaterina and Jimbo. For these 2 students, definitely you have already credit to be among the participants of the summer school, the first summer school of the International Society for the History of Medicine. I myself will support, let's say, to see you among the participants. I think that's all, and we are 1 minute ahead. So nice to see you, and I'm open for your proposal for different topic, different lectures. But you see, the topic is one, but sometimes we just simply need to see each other. As today we have seen Maria, many Marias actually, Alfredo, Evgenia, Boleslav, Professor Sorokina, she disappears, and many others, and of course the students. So let's keep our members to member club and see everyone in Riga in August. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.